don't worry. Hand it over to the Buddha. Just listen to him and you will see the light to all the darkness and miseries. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. By your side, day or night, rain or shine. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. Welcome him to our house to eternity. If you have a problem, don't worry. Hand it over to the Buddha. Just listen to him and you will see the light to all the darkness and miseries. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. By your side, day or night, rain or shine. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. Welcome him to our house to eternity. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. By your side, day or night, rain or shine. Gautama Buddha is here for you and me. Welcome him to our house to eternity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim and my Buddhist name is Thien. Welcome and everyone to the Dharma talk tonight, particularly the first-time comers. With the blessing of the Buddha, particularly with the support and the guiding of the abbot of Vien, Quang, and all the brothers and sisters in the Dharma. Once again, the Buddha's teaching tonight is taken place at Vien, Quang. We are actually entering the residence of the Buddha. And in any residence we have the owner, isn't it? And the keeper of the Buddha house is our Shangha. Namely, we have the abbot of the temple is the Venerable Minh, Minh, and today our guest speaker is Venerable Thich Thong Phap from Tasmania. And as usual, we have to chant the Buddha name to pay tribute to the Buddha in Vietnamese, and after that, as everyone knows, that Pali is the language of the north of India, and most of the sutra was written in Pali, and after that we can contemplate the name of the Buddha in Pali language. So would you please stand up to welcome the monks and the nuns, and after that we will chant the Buddha's name in Vietnamese.
Nam
the Dharma. We will have about 15 minutes. I dare not say it meditation, but probably 15 minutes for us to calm our mind. We just sit comfortably, close the eye gently, and focus to your breath. For 15 minutes, calming the mind starts.
The respectable Venerable Minh, Venerable Thich Thong Phap, good evening everyone. One of the problems of our society today is the so-called material society. People work, study, and look after themselves very well, but they are not happy and never satisfied with what they have achieved or possess. Still, many people suffer anxiety, depression, aversion, and loneliness, etc. Why doesn't material goods make people happy? Tonight, with the blessing of Venerable Minh, the abbot of Vien, Quang, and the support of all Dharma friends, we are honored to introduce Venerable Thich Thong Phap, who will give us a talk about Buddhism and life. I would like to share with you about Venerable Thich Thong Phap's autobiography. Venerable Thich Thong Phap, if I make a mistake, please accept my apologize in advance and forgive me. In 2001, Venerable Thich Thong Phap went to Vietnam to meet Hòa Thượng Thích Thanh Từ, who became his teacher. In January 2003, Hòa Thượng Thích nhập Quang ordained him as a novice monk at Vien, Thường Chiếu, Long Thành, Vietnam, with the name as Thich Thong Phap. Venerable Thich Thong Phap trained at Vien, Trúc Lâm, Đại Đăng, Southern California, and Vien, Chân Tâm in Oklahoma, USA, and was ordained a Bhikkhu in 2005. In his working life, he works as a teacher, a pastoral worker, and works with disabled people. And I should have said, Venerable Thich Thong Phap was born in Adelaide and went to Woodville High School. He still has his relatives who live in Port Adelaide in South Australia. So please welcome Venerable Thich Thong Phap.
Before we start, is the microphone working? Is it working now? Lift it up, or lift it up. Okay. Before I start this talk, I just want to chant a little bit to pay respects to the Buddha again. And people say that this chanting is in English, but it's not in English. It's in Sanskrit, which is one of the ancient languages of India. And it simply means that I pay my respects to Shakyamuni Buddha. And that's Sanskrit for Pitkamani Phap. Okay? Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. This Chandin looks so beautiful with all the candles and beautiful painting of our teacher, our Mahaguru, up the back, sitting under the Naranja tree, the Bodhi tree next to the Naranja. River, where he attained enlightenment. First of all, I want to start with a story from my own life. 30 years ago, this year, which is before many of you were even born, and before maybe many of you even came to Australia, I was teaching secondary school in Africa, in a country called Zimbabwe. And in my school, which was in a rural area, there were only 3 European teachers, 2 English and 1 Australian. The rest of the teachers and all the students were African. And one morning, when I was walking to my class, I had an arm full of books, exercise books. And one of my students came to me and said to me, "Sir, can I carry your books for you?" And because I'm an Australian man who's independent and does everything for himself, I said, no, I can do it. And my student said to me, so you can't accept a gift. So immediately I gave him all the books because I didn't want to lose face. I didn't want to be seen as somebody who couldn't accept a gift. But the lesson stayed with me always, that we have to learn to accept gifts as well as do things for other people. And when you become a Buddhist monk, you're constantly being given gifts. And I'm still learning the lesson to accept gifts. On that day, that student became my teacher. He taught me something very important about life. And on that day, I became his student. I learned something from him. Most of you, or all of you, will know that the word Thai, which I am, means teacher in English. But tonight, I will teach some things, I will give a talk, and I will be Thai, but I also want you to be my teacher. And the way that you can do that is that at the end of the evening, or the end of the talk, you can teach me by your questions, and by your thoughts and your ideas. So at the end of the evening, at the end of this Dharma talk, I will invite you to ask any question or say what you think, so that I can learn more from you. I don't know everything. I'm not yet a Buddha, so I don't know everything. And there is still much for me to learn. And I can learn that here tonight with you, if you are prepared to ask questions and to share with me what you think. I don't know the name of the person who introduced me. Sorry? I want to add some things to what excuse my terrible Vietnamese, has said. I want you to know that when I was a little boy, I grew up in Pennington, 1 street back from where now is Chua Phap. And my father taught me to ride a bicycle on the paddock, which is where now Chua Phap is built. That was in 1962, I think, or 61. 61. It's a long time ago. And I had no idea when I was a little boy learning to ride a bicycle. I was 9 years of age. Are there any 9-year-olds here? They're all home in bed asleep. I had no idea at 9 years of age that one day there would be a Vietnamese Buddhist temple on the very place I was learning to ride a bicycle. at 9 years of age, I had never heard of Vietnam. And at 9 years of age, I did not ever think that it would be possible for me to become a Buddhist monk in a Vietnamese tradition. So if you live a long life, you can see many changes, and it's very fascinating to see where your life goes. When I was 19, 10 years later, it was the time about the middle or towards the end of the American war in Vietnam. And at that time, in Australia, for the first time, we were seeing images of warfare on television. Nobody had ever seen war up close until the war that was happening in Vietnam was on television. And to us, those images were so terrible, and the suffering of people was so terrible, that it changed the opinion of Australian people towards our support of America in that war. And I was one of those people. At that time, at 19 years of age, the Australian government was conscripting young men into the army and sending them to Vietnam. And I had grown up in a Christian family. And I grew up believing that it was wrong to kill. And nothing could change my mind about that. It was just wrong to kill other people. To me, it was wrong to go to their country and kill them for reasons that nobody really understood. And at that time I was training to be a teacher, and I thought I would have to go to this country that I've only just heard of, and kill children, a teacher. Or because I really loved my grandmothers and my grandfather, I would have to go and kill old people. And I couldn't do that. There was nothing in me that would make me join the army and go to Vietnam. So I joined an organisation called the Campaign for Peace in Vietnam. And I demonstrated in the streets of Adelaide with thousands of other people to stop the war in Vietnam and to bring Australian troops back to Australia. From that time onwards, Vietnam was in my heart all the time. So that when, in 1975, when the communists came to power, again on television there were images of what was happening in Vietnam coming here. And still Vietnam was in my heart. In 1977, the first boat people started to arrive in Australia and come to Adelaide. And I think it was called something like the Indo-Chinese Refugee Support Group or something like that, association, was helping people to resettle in Australia. And of course everybody in the world had heard of Thich Thong Phap, and he's burning himself in Saigon. And so Vietnam was even more deeply in my heart. And I heard of a book by a Buddhist monk called A Lotus in the Sea of Fire. And it was written by a monk called Thich Thong Phap. And I always wanted to know more about that book and that monk, because I had lost my Christian faith and had become interested in Buddhism. But it wasn't until 1994 or 95 that I turned my attention more fully to Thich Thong Phap's teaching. And then a few years went by, and in Adelaide here, where I come from, I started a meditation group in the tradition of Thich Thong Phap. And then I went to Langmai, to Plum Village in France, And then I came home and I spoke to a friend of mine who is also a monk in this city, a Vietnamese monk. And I told him that I wanted to go to Vietnam. So he took me. And his teacher was another monk called the most Venerable Thich Thong Phap. And so I was introduced to this monk. And he touched my heart very deeply. And I became a student. So from the age of 9, when I rode a bicycle on a paddock where one day there would be a Vietnamese temple, to the age of 19, when I refused to join the war and go to Vietnam to kill people, to the age of, how old was I, 52, when I arrived in Long Tan at Thien Vien to be ordained a Sai. How many years is that? About 35 years or 36 years. A very long time. And when I was in Thien being ordained on the morning, 4th of January 2004, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I will never forget those statistics. I was kneeling in the Buddha hall in front of exactly this. The Buddha sitting under a Bodhi tree with the river Naranjara flying by. And I was kneeling quietly there while the ceremony was happening, and 3 thoughts came into my mind, and I will never forget these thoughts. The first thought was that I must come from a very good family to be here now, in this place, becoming a Buddhist monk. Now, if you ever read some of the texts, especially, for example, what we call in English the Dharma Sutra, there's a constant reference to the sons and daughters of good families. The Buddha makes reference always, all the Buddhist texts make reference to the Buddha's disciples as sons and daughters of good families. And that's exactly the thought that I had kneeling in front of the Buddha image, that I'm a son of a good family. And that was a wonderful thing to realise. I'd never thought that I came from a good family before, but this time I did. And the second thought I had was when I looked at that river running behind the Bodhi tree, the Naranjara, I thought to myself, I am about to step into that river of thousands of years of human beings trying hard to live a decent spiritual life. That's what I'm going to do. I am now stepping into that river and becoming truly a son of the Buddha. And the third thing I thought was, when I was 19, I wouldn't come to Vietnam to fight the war. But now I have come to Vietnam to keep an appointment with Vietnam. But this war was inside myself, to struggle with my own mind, really. So I want you to know those things, because to me they're important things for my own life and my own development. And I want you to know very clearly that even though I'm a European, even though I'm from Port Adelaide, the Buddha's message is for everybody and can touch everybody's heart and transform anybody's life. That's my experience. Okay. I want to read you a poem by an American poet called Mary Oliver. Some people may have heard of Mary Oliver. This is a beautiful poem. It's called The Summer Day. It's good to read about the summer in the middle of winter, to remind us that one day it will be warm again. And if you lived in Hobart where I do, warm days are wonderful things to have because it's so cold there. I happen to like the cold weather, but a lovely warm day, a summer day, is beautiful, and especially beautiful in Hobart. The summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? One of the wonderful things about this poem is that Mary Oliver introduces us to the importance of paying attention. She doesn't necessarily know how to pray, but she knows how to pay attention. In Buddhism, that's called mindfulness, paying attention, being present to what is actually happening. How many times do you eat something and suddenly you realise, oh, it's gone, and I don't even remember eating it? Do you ever have that experience? Or you're driving along in your car and suddenly you've arrived and you didn't even know that you'd done the journey properly. That's because the mind is not with what we are doing in the present moment. The mind is somewhere else with our thoughts and our feelings in the past, with our regrets or in the future, with our worries, or considering what he has done to me or what I'm going to do to her, all those things. Very rarely do we pay attention to what is actually happening. And if we do pay attention to where we are right here, right now, what do we notice? We notice the swan. We notice the black bear. We notice the grasshopper. Not only do we notice the grasshopper, but we notice that when the grasshopper eats, its mouth doesn't go up and down, but side to side. We notice that it has many eyes that are complicated, or two very complex eyes. Mary Oliver in this poem is paying very close attention to what is before her. She notices these amazing things in nature all around us. People in Australia are very fortunate, and certainly people in Adelaide are very fortunate because we live so close to nature. We don't have to go very far, and we're in the Flinders Ranges, which is one of the most beautiful and one of the oldest places in the world. Once the Flinders Ranges were as high as the Himalayas. Because they have been there for so many millions of years, erosion has worn them down. But do we know that? Do we pay attention to it? Do we feel how spiritual the Flinders Ranges is? We only have to go down the south coast around Waipinga and along past Victor Harbour down the Coorong and to Malang and those places where there is so much physical beauty, or into the Adelaide Hills where there is so much physical beauty. And if we can pay attention and see that and see the wonders of nature, that will really lift our hearts. It will really nurture us and feed us. And that's what Mary Oliver was experiencing with her mindfulness, with keeping her mind not with all these thoughts about which she could do nothing or very little, but where she was right there and right then. And she talks about being blessed by this ability to be present to what she was experiencing and to be present to the world around her. She's also aware that life is not permanent. Everything changes all the time. Nothing stays the same. And all too soon, we will die. Now some people might say, oh, that's a miserable thought. But if you think of it every day, it's not a miserable thought. It helps you to appreciate the life you have. Tonight, after this talk, I'm going to Victor Harbour. My brother-in-law, who is the mayor of Victor Harbour, won a car for a weekend. So he's given it to me to drive to Victor Harbour and then come back on Monday. It's a beautiful car. My car's an old bomb, really, but this one's, you can Bluetooth your mobile phone and everything. Fabulous car. So I'm going down there. And I'm going down there partly to my brother-in-law's 60th birthday, but also to meet or to spend some time with my niece's daughter, who is my great niece. Now, because I'm a monk, I don't have children. Well, some monks can have children, but I don't have one. A childless monk. And so this child is very similar to being my grandchild. That's how I feel about her. And of course, she's very beautiful and I love her with all my heart. So I'm going to take this opportunity because the opportunity will not always be there. Who knows how long I have left to live? Who knows how long she has to live? We don't know those things. And I'm going there to pay attention to this beautiful child because she's my family. And when I visited her for the first time in March, my niece, who is a Christian, went to church on the Sunday morning, and I was able to look after the baby by myself. And so I took the baby for a walk over to the park, and we sat on the swing. And I was swinging back and forth on the swing with the baby in my lap. And the baby's head was resting on my heart. And she went to sleep. And while she was asleep, I could feel all this love going from my heart into her and coming back to me. It was the most wonderful feeling, the most wonderful experience. And it bonded me to my great niece. Now I really know this child because our hearts have touched. And while she was lying there, I told her about all of her ancestors, where she had come from, where her ancestors had come from. I spoke to her in Welsh and Cornish because those are the languages, as well as English, of some of her ancestors. It was a wonderful time. And every day I remember death. One of the things I do in Hobart is to work with people who are dying. I work in a hospice and I work with people who are dying, so I'm always surrounded by people who are dying. With that thought, with the very thought that Mary Oliver shares with us, doesn't everything die at last and too soon? It means that I'm much more appreciative of life, much more appreciative of the people I love and the people who love me, and much more appreciative of the responsibility that I have to the whole world, to love the whole world in the same way that I love my great niece, to love all of you, to love every sentient being, the worms, the dogs, the cats, everything, with the same love. Because that's the commitment I made when I became a Buddhist monk. And then Mary Oliver ends her poem with a question. And I want this to be your question tonight. And maybe, if it makes sense to you, to keep this question with you all of your life. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What are you going to do with the one life that you get? Now, of course, there's rebirth and those things, but I will not ever be, or there will never be another Thich Thong Phap ever again when I die. It's not this thing that is reborn. Some person inherits the fruit of my karma, the fruit of what I have done. So this person here has one life, one opportunity. What do I plan to do with this one wild and precious life? That is the question that we must all ask ourselves. Now, recently I received a letter from Diabetes Australia because I have type 2 diabetes, and the letter was welcoming me to my own personally controlled e-health record. You can now keep all your health details are recorded, and it can be passed on to any practitioner, any medicine, doctor or specialist that you need to meet with and talk about your health with. And it said, "Dear Sir, I am writing to you because you are registered with the National Diabetes Service Scheme. The Australian Government's personally controlled e-health record system is now available, and Diabetes Australia believes having an e-health record can help you and your clinicians better manage your diabetes. Your e-health record will contain a secure online summary of your health information, making it easier for the health professionals who look after you to make decisions about your care. It will also help you take control of your health and manage your health information. Just as other technologies have revolutionised the way we manage our lives, e-health has the potential to change how we manage our healthcare." Now, I'm very grateful to live in this country where myself and my loved ones, both human and other than human, have access to good healthcare. Australia is a wonderful place to live for those kind of reasons. But is a life to be managed, or is a life to be lived? I'm not arguing with medicine or even the e-health record. What I'm arguing with, or what I'm concerned about, is the idea that a life, one wild and precious life, is to be managed rather than to be lived. A few years ago, I was the Buddhist chaplain at Flinders University, and one day I was walking through the Flinders Medical Centre and up through the medical school on my way to the main campus, and I saw a picture of a very kind of respectable looking doctor who had white hair and a beautiful suit and looking very kind of self-possessed and pleased with himself. And underneath it said that this doctor was coming to Flinders Medical Centre to give talks about human capital and human resources. And that made me ask questions. A similar kind of question to the one I asked about the letter I received about my, what is it called? See, I'm terrible at these things. My e-health record. Is a human being capital? Is our lives to be reduced solely to being a resource? Are we just capital for the system to use in its own economic ends? Or is a human life more? Well, I agree with Mary Oliver. Life is precious. And furthermore, I agree with the Buddha. Life has to be, a human life has to be lived fully as a human life. Not as a resource for somebody else, not as capital, but as a human life. The Buddha had to make this decision for himself. The Buddha was not always the Buddha. The Buddha started life as a prince, Prince Siddhartha Gautama. And his father was a king, Suddhodana. And King Suddhodana had great ambitions for his son. He wanted his son to be the king in the kingdom. And when the prince was born, there was a prophecy. He would be a world ruler. It could be that he was the ruler of the kingdom, but it could also be that he would become enlightened and become a ruler over the human heart, someone who could control themselves and live a full human life. So King Suddhodana was determined that his son would not become a holy man. He wanted him to continue the family business, which was ruling Kapilavastu. But the prince grew up to be a person, a deeply compassionate person, and a person who asked questions about life. He was restless. And one day, the prince went for a drive in his chariot with his charioteer, whose name was Channa. And as they were driving along, before I say this, I have to tell you that the king wanted his son to be so happy that he would never question anything. So he made sure that the prince had the best of everything, the best food, the best education, the best clothing, the best home, the best of everything, and that he should never ever see anything that would bother him, that would turn his mind. Now that's a lot of work for a king to do, is to keep his son so happy. But on this particular day, Siddhartha went out in his chariot with his charioteer, Channa. And as they were driving along, maybe you know this story, as they were driving along, they saw a sick person who was ill. And the Siddhartha, the prince, was amazed. He'd never seen sickness before. "What's that?" he said. And his charioteer, Channa, said to him, "Well, prince, that's a sick person. That's a person whose body is not in balance anymore. And it happens to all of us. Even you, prince, will one day become sick." And they drove on a little further, and they saw an old person. He'd never seen an old person because his dad didn't want him to know about these kind of things. And he said to his charioteer, "What's that?" And Channa said, "Well, that's an old person. As you live longer and longer and longer, your body changes. You get older. You get sick. And it happens to all of us. And one day, it will happen to you." And they went on a bit further in the chariot, and the prince was becoming more and more concerned. And they saw a dead person. And the prince said, "What is that?" And Channa said, "That is a dead person. That is a person from whom the life force has departed. We will all die, including you, prince." Now the prince was really upset. He'd not thought of these things before, and he wanted to know the answers to these great problems of suffering for human beings. They went on a little further, and the prince saw a monk sitting in a cave practicing meditation. And he said, "What is that?" And Channa said, "That is a holy man, that is a sadhana. And he's practicing a samana, and he's practicing to overcome the suffering that you have encountered today. Now, the prince went home and he was even more disturbed by what he'd seen. In the meantime, the king had found a way to find him a beautiful wife, because he thought, well, perhaps that will satisfy him and he won't ask any more questions. And of course he did, and her name was Yashodhara. And they had a beautiful son, whom Siddhartha called Rahula, which means something that ties me to this life. But it became too hard for him. He couldn't live with these questions, following the family business, pretending that everything was fabulous when he knew it wasn't. And so we know from the story of the Buddha, or of the prince, that one night he left with his horse Kondaka, and they rode away, and he became a samana. And then he spent 6 years practicing various things until under the Bodhi tree he understood what life was really about. Not only did he understand about suffering and the end of suffering, but he also understood what it means to be truly a human being. What is a human life for? And the Buddha had his answer. His question could be the same as Mary Oliver's. What is it you plan to do with your life? Are you just going to stay in the family business? Are you going to become human capital? A human resource? Or are you going to live your life, as Thich Thong Phap says, more deeply? That's a choice that each of us has to make. And the Buddha came up with some answers. Whatever we do to be fully human, from the Buddha's point of view, whatever we do to live our lives fully, whatever we do to live our one wild life properly, there are 3 things the Buddha teaches that we must do. It doesn't matter if we become a doctor and train at the Fitness Medical Centre, that's a good thing to do in your life. It doesn't matter if you become a human resources management person. If you're helping people, that's a good thing to do in your life. The question is not what you actually do with your life in terms of a job, because we all need to make some kind of income to keep ourselves going and to provide for our families. That's not the issue. The issue is not what you actually do. It's the quality of the life that you live. It's the motivation behind the life that we live. Are you living your life just to make lots of money and get the latest car and the latest this and the latest that? And is that going to last forever? How long does the newest car last? Until the next newest car comes along and your mind wants that car. No. What the Buddha is suggesting is that there is much more to a human life than just consuming and producing and doing the right thing according to the family plan for you. There are 3 things the Buddha teaches us that we must do to live a full human life. One of them is to live in a moral way. How do we live with other people? How do we live with each other? Do we live with each other on the basis of greed and wanting and anger and hatred and ignorance about others, not being willing to understand, not being willing to care about? Is that how we live with other people? Or do we live with them compassionately? Do we live with each other with lots of loving kindness? Are our hearts open to one another? And those are not just theoretical or abstract ideas. Those are real things in the world. Just recently, the Australian government has been promoting a whole program aimed at bringing an end to racism in Australian life. Racism is a form of hatred. That's all. It's no more real than hatred. And so the Australian government has set up this program where you can buy a badge that says, "Racism ends with me." That's a wonderful thing for the government to do. To tell its citizens, racism is not a good thing. We don't want that in our country. And we are all responsible for bringing it an end. So that's just bringing an end to hatred. That's a very practical way of applying what the Buddha's teaching is about how we live with one another, living with each other with an open heart, living with each other with compassion and understanding. But the Buddha goes into it much more deeply than just that. He says, you have to choose a job that you love, that is good for you, is good for your heart, is going to make you happy, and is going to be beneficial to other people. If you choose a job that's just going to make you a lot of money so that you can buy a big house in a flash suburb, it may not be much help to you. It may not make you happy. There's nothing wrong with having a lovely house in a flash suburb, but that can't be the goal of your life, or the goal of your job. The goal of your job is to make yourself truly happy and to be helpful to others. Then the Buddha talks about the importance of not killing, not stealing, not using our sexuality in a harmful way, speaking well and listening deeply to others. And he tells us not to use intoxicants, not to use drugs and alcohol. Lots of Westerners, when you are teaching them the 5 precepts, they don't like you to tell them not to use drugs and alcohol, because they think, oh, I've got a right to drink if I want to. Well, fabulous, you do, I suppose. But you have to think about the consequences of that sort of thing. We live in a country, in Australia, where the use of alcohol is normal. Where it's normal for young people at the end of year 12 to go and drink lots of alcohol and get very drunk. Because that's what their parents are doing. Is that normal? Is that normal to render yourself useless with alcohol? And the same with drugs. Every one of those things, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and unwholesome speech, they are all possibilities if we use drugs and alcohol. How much crime, how much killing, how much rape and terrible things like that are founded in the use of drugs and alcohol. And killing isn't just us going up and stabbing someone or shooting them. No, it could be that we support all kinds of things that lead to the destruction of life, such as the arms industry. In our support of the arms industry, we are supporting the killing of other people. And from my point of view, this doesn't have to be your point of view at all, but from my point of view, for me it's important to be a vegetarian so that I don't support the destruction of other living beings like cattle and sheep and chickens and ducks and all those creatures who are also like me, sentient beings, who also like me have the same nature of a Buddha. And we have these factory farms that produce millions of creatures just for us to eat, and they lead terrible lives. So when the Buddha teaches us morality, he's talking about how we live with everything. To lead a full human life, you have to be aware of how you live with everyone and everybody, every creature on the planet Earth. And eventually, how you live with the planet itself. We all know about climate change and the destruction that is bringing us. So the Buddha says to live a full human life, is to have a concern for all these things and to live in a way that's wholesome and loving and compassionate and open-hearted. The second thing that the Buddha teaches us in terms of living a full human life is what we call mental development. What do we do with our minds? Because everything, according to the Buddha's teaching, comes from our mind. In the first chapter of the Dharma, which is a beautiful little book of the sayings of the Buddha, he says, all things are made by the mind. The mind precedes all things. What is an example of that? Well, let's look at war. War isn't created by the rain falling out of the sky. It's not created by other forces like that. It's created by human minds. It's anger, it's greed, it's hatred, taken to an extreme, a terrible extreme. And it's a very ancient habit of human beings, which we so far have not been able to give up. So our mind is what creates that. If our mind can create violence, in the same way our mind can create peace. And it's a choice we have. We have a choice of what to do with our mind. I point to here, but the mind is also here, the mind and the heart. What you do with your mind determines what happens in your life and in the lives of others. So the Buddha teaches us about mindfulness, like Mary Oliver, being able to be present to everything in our life. And also the Buddha teaches about meditation. And as we learnt tonight, and in most Buddhist traditions, or almost all Buddhist traditions, we become mindful of the breath, watching or being attentive to the breath as it enters and leaves the nostrils. You might think that's a bit silly, why would you do that? Because it's what helps calm the mind down. I also work in Hobart in the Pontville Detention Centre, where all the inhabitants of that detention centre are young men. Something like 200 or 300 young men who have just arrived in Australia on boats and have left very difficult situations in Sri Lanka, in Afghanistan, Iraq and Vietnam. And they put them all together in a detention centre, together, all these different cultures and religions, people who have never met each other before. They have no families here, the young men have no father to direct them, no mother to care for them. There are 11-year-olds. You are going to have problems in a situation like that when you've got young men living together like that, who have been traumatized. So when I go there to teach meditation, I tell them two things. The purpose of this meditation, of this mindfulness, is to help you calm your mind. When someone says something that upsets you, just come back to your breath. Don't be, what we say in Australian English, knocked off your perch. Don't be disturbed by this. Just come back to your breath. Otherwise, you will get caught up in the same fights and all of that sort of thing. You are responsible. You are, and so am I, with what you do with your mind. So to calm the mind is very important, especially in difficult circumstances like a detention centre. The other thing I say is that now that you have got to Australia, we hope that eventually you will become citizens. And I always tell them about that great South Australian citizen who is Lieutenant Governor of this nation, of this state. Mr. Lever was a Vietnamese boat person who arrived, an illegal boat person who arrived here, I'm not sure what year, it was in the 1970s, and he is the Lieutenant Governor of this, the second in command of South Australia. You can do anything you want to when you come to Australia. But you have to have a strong mind to be able to achieve your goals, your good goals. And that's what meditation will help to give you. It helps to make you mindful so that you can notice the wonders of the world around you, including the people that you love. It helps to calm the mind so that you don't do silly things, and it strengthens the mind so that you can achieve the good things that are possible. And the last thing the Buddha tells us to do to be fully human is to become wise. This is a question about how we see the world. What is my world view? Do I see myself as something solid and permanent? Or do I see myself as something constantly moving and changing? Do I see life as something that should stay the same? And when it changes, do I get disappointed or upset? The Buddha teaches us that everything is changing all the time. And you have to learn to, we all have to learn to accept that, so that we don't try to hold on to things and make them permanent, and then suffer when they change. One of the ways of thinking about this is, and I say this sometimes in funerals, we love somebody, so we want to hold on to them. But when we hold on to them like this, our hand is not open to receive the next thing that life has to give us. We have to accept that change happens, that even I change, that there is nothing permanent about me. And when I open my hand to let go of the idea that there are permanent things, then my hand is open to receive the next thing in life. That's wisdom. And that wisdom of the Buddha can be applied in our lives all the time. So those are the three things the Buddha teaches so that we can live full human life, so that we can do what Mary Oliver suggests and live a wild and precious life if we apply those teachings of the Buddha. Now that's very easy for me to say, and I could get up and walk out of here and think, oh, what am I going to do next? That's very hard. He's invited me to do something very difficult. And it is difficult. It is difficult to get up every morning and sit on the cushion and meditate and calm the mind. It's difficult to do those things. It's 8:30 now. Oh, 5 minutes, yes. The clock's fast. The Buddha gives us a way of supporting ourselves to live a full human life. First of all, we have to have confidence in our ability to be the good human beings that we are. We are, in our hearts, already the same nature as the Buddha. We are all Buddhas already. We all have inherent within us the capacity for loving kindness, the capacity for compassion, the capacity for joy, and the capacity for open-heartedness. We can live that way all the time. That's what we are really like. And we have to learn together to have confidence in that. The second thing is that we have to have, to support us, we have to have a kind of map for life. A map that will tell us how to go to the end, how to get or achieve this life of richness and wonder that is our inheritance. That map we call the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching. What you call in Vietnamese Thich Thong Phap. That's the roadmap. If we follow those teachings, if we grow to understand them, then we have got the means to achieve that. And the third thing that will support us is good friends. Good friends and mentors. We need to spend our time with mature people, people who understand how to live a good life, what makes a good life. We need to keep the company of wise people, as the Sutta says. People who will support us in all the struggles of our lives. And of course we need this famous word, a mentor, someone we can go and talk to when things get very difficult. And we always assume that it will be our parents who will be the mentor, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes your mum or your dad can't hear what you have to say, they can't listen because they're too involved in you emotionally. So you need somebody else, somebody mature, somebody wise, somebody loving to go to with your questions, with your concerns. It might be a monk, it might be a nun, it might be a teacher, it might be your aunt or your uncle. But you have to have someone to listen to you, who loves you and cares about you and wants the best for you. So those are the three things that will support us. Confidence in our own inherent goodness, a roadmap, which we call the Dharma, and good friends. If we have those three things, then we will be able to achieve a good human life. A life where we can live well with each other, where we can purify our minds, we can take control of our lives, and the wisdom to understand how life really is. Now I think I've come in exactly by 8:30, so that's pretty good. Are there any questions? Or anything you want to say? One of the things that we could have done was have pieces of paper and you could write your questions down and put them in a bell like they do at Plum Village. So we think that until it was too late. So don't be shy. Or be shy and ask the question anyway.
Good evening, everyone. Respected Venerable Thich Thong Phap, respected Venerable Thien, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all our beloved young people today. We are welcome you to come in tonight. It's the first talk our organizing team to try to organize for you to listen to our beloved Venerable Thich Thong Phap teaching, and I hope that you enjoy. Tell me that, did you enjoy the talk? We can do it in a meditation way. We can do another way by not letting, and we can just do like this. Remember, everyone attending the meditation night another day. But anyway, we need more practice to make us perfect. Now is the time, Thai, we call Thai, and Thai understand some of the Vietnamese, even he didn't, now he had a time to practice. But you understand what I say, do you? Now is the time, the question times. You can ask the question either in a formal or informal way. You have a chance to put up your hand, and I can monitor and give you the form to ask our master the questions in regard to what he has taught us so far. Or either you can put in writing, in paper and pen. Stephen, Zhang, Nghiệp, and anyone else you can. I have some paper and pen. You have your own pen. Would you like anyone want to ask the question now? Put your hands up. Steve, would you like to come down? Alright, and you can stay there, and you have the microphone.
Yes, I do have a microphone. I'm Stephen, and I'd like to say welcome back to Adelaide. I appreciate your talks because in the past I used to go to all the Vietnamese talks and I couldn't understand Buddhism. It was only when I went to your English talk at Dr. Dharma's clinic. Yes, that was the first time I really started to understand Buddhism. So the more I listened to talks, the more I found out how practical it was, how you could deal with stress and what life throws at you. So I'd like to recommend Buddhism to anyone, younger ages or older ages, and that helps you throughout your life. So today, I'd like to ask, what is the difference between Christianity and Buddhism? And also, I'd like to say thank you and good luck in your PhD in Buddhism.
Thank you very much, Steve. You can come back to your stair and you're in your chair, and would you like to answer the question upstairs on stage? Thank you.
First of all, I want to say that I haven't seen Stephen since January of last year, and he has grown so much in that time, and he's so much taller, and he's such a handsome boy, and he's such a nice boy. I think his mum must be very proud of him now. She was always proud of him, but she's especially proud of him now. So it's lovely to meet you again, Stephen. What is the difference between Christianity and Buddhism? Well, I suppose there are some philosophical differences, and those differences are not easy to reconcile. And I don't necessarily want to spend time talking about the philosophical differences, because that's not necessarily the most important thing. I'm more interested in what brings people together as human beings than what separates us. There are always 1,000 things you can find to separate yourself from others. But that, according to Buddha's teaching, is not wisdom. It's not wisdom to constantly separate yourself and see another person as other and as distinct from you. So I'm much more interested to think about what is it that Christians and Buddhists have in common, or what is it that Muslims and Buddhists, or Muslims and Christians, or non-believers of any sort have in common. The thing we have in common is that we are all human beings. Human beings, in my 61 years, seem to me to be pretty much the same wherever you go. There are cultural differences and linguistic differences, and those are significant. We mustn't pretend that they're not important in some way. But being a human being is pretty much the same wherever you go. And I learned that very clearly when I was a teacher in Zimbabwe, being a white man living with black people. I discovered that the difference between myself and these other people was not important. So we have to look at Christianity, for example, if we're looking at Christianity from a Buddhist point of view, at what are the things we have in common with them? What are the ways in which we can work together with Christians to make this a better world? How can we serve the community with Christians? And there are many opportunities to do that. For example, in Tasmania, I'm a member of something called Spiritual Care Australia, which is an organisation, a professional organisation for pastoral care workers and chaplains. There are now 4 Buddhists on it, but most of the rest of the people are Christians, and we work together to provide pastoral care for people. The Christian chaplain at the Royal Hobart Hospital, if he gets a Buddhist coming in, he rings me straight away to come down and see this person. And, it happened one day that he said, I've got a Thai lady here, and her husband's dying, can you come? And I thought, well, you know, I come from the Vietnamese tradition, I can chant Thâm Tập Trí Tuệ in Vietnamese and all of that, but that's not going to make any difference to her because she's not a Vietnamese Buddhist, she's a Thai Buddhist. So I had to go to my library and find a book of chanting in Pali and do my best to chant in Pali. And I think I did an okay job because she also asked me to conduct her husband's funeral, which was a lovely thing to do. So that was the result of a Christian and a Buddhist working together for the benefit of other beings. There are many Buddhists and Christians and Muslims and Jews and you name it who work together for peace in the world, for the environment. So I think the question is really, how do I work with these people who think differently from me, who pray differently from me, but are essentially like me, a human being? It doesn't mean that you have to kind of give up being a Buddhist and think that there's a sort of a blah type religion in the world and you can just, we're all the same. We're not all the same in the detail, in the philosophy, but as human beings we're all the same. Our capacity to love is the same. And the focus of Christianity, when it's at its best, is love and forgiveness. And isn't that true in Buddhism too? Buddhists offer Christianity the practice of mindfulness and meditation, and lots of Christians love that. Christianity offers, according to the Dalai Lama, offers Buddhism the opportunity to engage with pastoral care and chaplaincy. So we can share and work together. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah, so great. I hope that Steve satisfied with the question thầy already given. Thương yêu, hiểu biết, tha thứ, khoan dung, những đức hạnh mà tứ vô lượng tâm từ bi hỷ xả trong đạo Phật của chúng ta. Sorry, I have to mix and blend in, Vietnamese and English. So we have some parents here, 16 with the parents, the children, and you will be, the leaders in the family and helping to bring the children with us to the Dharma talk or any further activity in the future we are organizing. Thank you very much, Thầy. Do you have any other questions? Anyone want to put your hands up, please? Next one. Thank you. What's your name, darling? Kim. Kim will ask the question. Kim.
Hi, thank you for coming and sharing with us today. So, as you may know, we all live in a society where we're also surrounded by materialistic things. So, what would you say to help us? What would you recommend to help us to stop being, or prevent us from being too obsessed with these materialistic things like money, cars, lifestyle?
Thank you, Kim. How to live a middle way. Please, thầy xin thầy giải thích dùm cho Kim. Please explain to her question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Kim. I think the answer to this question is really to get to know yourself better. What are your motivations in life? Why do you feel this way? John, are you able to move the camera just that way a little bit so I can see his face? Sorry. Because she's been so kind to ask the question and I'd like to see her. So you have to really get to know yourself and ask yourself questions about what makes this thing I want so important to me? Like I want, see I don't buy things very much, except plane tickets from Hobart to Adelaide. So I don't know, plasma televisions, is there such a thing? What is it about that I want? What is happening in my heart and mind that makes me want these things. You have to get to know yourself really well. You have to look into your own heart and mind at your motivations when it comes to everything, and especially when it comes to wanting things. What will gaining this thing give me really? How will it solve the major problems of my life? What is pulling me to this? So the first thing you have to do is to know yourself and become responsible for yourself. Now, it might be that some things you buy, or you could buy, are worth having. They could be useful to you and to other people. They could be beneficial to you and to other people. You use the word obsession, okay? An obsession is something that occurs in the mind. An obsession is not something that sits in a tree and waits for you and flies down like a bird and says, "Here I am, be obsessed." No, it's in your own heart and mind. So you have to get to know your own heart and mind first. And then you can ask yourself questions about whether you want this thing, or whether you need this thing, or is this thing valuable for me to have? And if I'm being motivated by an obsession, if I'm driven to want this thing, maybe I have some kind of problem that I need to look at. And I don't mean a big psychological problem, I mean a spiritual problem. There is something I need to investigate about myself here. The other thing that you need to remember is that the way that our society is constructed is that it constantly barrages us in television, magazines, with the idea that you must have this. And it's very hard to resist that. It tells you that you will be a better person if you drive this kind of car. You will be more beautiful, more sexy, more, all these kinds of things if you have that. And we see that on television all the time. We are fed all these images and ideas all the time. And it's very hard for us to resist those things. After all, we're human beings. Okay? We're not super people yet, until we are fully Buddhas. Okay? So we need to be understanding to ourselves. If television, if peer pressure, if magazines seem to be driving you to want, then maybe you need to watch less television. Use the internet less or more judiciously, more wisely. You need to take charge of that part of your life where you will be constantly exposed to the demands of the consumer society. That's two things I can think of. If I think of any others, I'll send an email to someone. Are you satisfied with that answer at all?
You can put our hands up if you agree and listen to the time. Are you happy with that, Kim? The answer? Yes.
You might also disagree, and I'd like to know if you disagree.
Yeah, you need to understand, we need to understand ourselves first, okay? Confidence, get control, don't get influenced, and don't get affected by others, okay? You are decide your future, okay? Now, dear Thầy, we have another question from one of our audience tonight. What is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? Please explain. Thank you very much.
Now that's a great question. They're all great questions, but that's a really interesting one. In some ways, they're very similar. I mean, what is different is the word, the concept of intelligence and the concept of wisdom. In English, sometimes they're not so separate as concepts. But if I thought about intelligence as a capacity, a mental capacity to process information and to use it well, that might be intelligence. Wisdom is to really understand how the world works, how to actually live well in the world, how to understand my nature as a human being. That's wisdom. And that requires us to constantly question. In some ways, wisdom does not provide us with answers. It only provides us with the occasion for more questions, more investigation. And all great philosophers around the world, people like Socrates, people like the Buddha, tell us you must constantly investigate the world in order, and your own heart, in order to understand more deeply. And that depth of understanding is wisdom. But it's also intelligent to do that. It also makes sense. It's also what a bright person will do, what a sensible person will do, what an intelligent person will do. So maybe at that point intelligence is like a servant of wisdom. But intelligence is also this other thing of how we process information and how we apply the information that we have processed. Wisdom is closely connected with morality and ethics and how we live in the world, and it's closely connected with how we train our minds. You can be a very intelligent person who does terrible things. The people who instigated the Holocaust, the killing of 12 million human beings in the Second World War, 6 million of them Jewish. Those Nazis were highly intelligent people. They had it all sorted out. I'm sure Pol Pot was quite a clever chap. But you don't want him coming around for dinner. Okay, so wisdom is closely connected with love and compassion. In Buddhism, we say that we must have both wisdom and compassion. You can't have a bird flying with one wing. If you only have wisdom, then the bird's going to fall down because it's only flapping one wing. It's got to have compassion as well. So there's a relationship there between wisdom and love and the care of other human beings. It can also be intelligent, but as I said, intelligent people can be pretty wicked people too. I hope that's answered the question.
Thank you very much. It's very good in depth of the answer from Thien. And I guess therefore of the audience here appreciate that answer. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Would you like to ask? Even the parents can have the opportunity if you want to. As Thien already mentioned that we have only one opportunity in life. So today we have an opportunity. It's very hard to gather all of you to come because some of the young people normally want to go to the party, go to the pub, to the club, or have some exciting moment in another world in the weekend. So it's very great. We're very proud that you come here. It means you are interested in finding the way how to achieve happiness and success in your life. Anyone want to ask a question? Put your hands up or yes.
Thank you coming for tonight to teach us. The question I'm asking is for the young people. Because it's at school, a lot of young people they're having bully, from the others. if we are stuck the Buddha, we know what to do, we calm ourselves down, and then this sort out the problem. But for young people, they don't know what to do. They're always thinking about suicide, you know, and then this, the question I'm asking is, what should they do and to calm them down, and then this just solve the problem by themselves. Okay.
When a person is a bully, what that means is that they are actually suffering very badly. A happy person will not be a bully. Okay? If the person is happy in their life, they're not going to have an interest in bullying other people. A bully is probably a person, it's hard to say what they are suffering from, but they're suffering from something that would make them want to use their strength to harm another person, or to use their words to harm another person. Because bullies don't just attack with the body, they attack with words as well. So the first thing to understand is that the person who is a bully is a person who is suffering. And we have to have compassion for people who suffer. We have to try and understand what is it in their life that would lead them to do this thing. So that's compassion, we have compassion for them. But as I just said, we have to have wisdom. There's a beautiful story that is told, maybe you know this story. It's a story told by a Cambodian monk who's now passed away, called Mahagosananda. Mahagosananda was a monk in Cambodia who went to America before Pol Pot came to power. So he was not murdered by the Pol Pot regime. He remained in America, and when Pol Pot lost power, he was able to come back to Cambodia and to teach his people. And he kept going around Cambodia, he walked around Cambodia, teaching the Cambodians who had been so deeply hurt by the Pol Pot regime. He taught them, hatred never ceases by hatred. Hatred only ever ceases by love. And he taught that. He was a great man, a wonderful man. And he wrote a little book, a thin book, the name of which I cannot remember. It has a story in it. And the story is what I'm going to tell you. There was a dragon king who breathed fire all the time. And every time he opened his mouth and breathed fire, it would set fire to somebody's house. It would burn their clothes and singe their hair. And so he had no friends in the local village because he breathed fire all the time. One day he was sitting by the roadside being very unhappy, and a bodhisattva came walking past. And the dragon king said to the bodhisattva, "Venerable bodhisattva, please, can you help me? I have no friends, I'm so lonely because I keep burning people with the fire that I breathe." And the bodhisattva said, "Oh, just learn to be more compassionate and don't burn people with your breath." So the dragon king listened to what the bodhisattva had to say. And he went off to the local village and stopped breathing fire. And everyone was pleased about this because he was really quite a beautiful dragon and they were happy to have him in the village. But after a while, they started to get used to him. And in English, we have this saying that familiarity breeds contempt. When you become very familiar with someone, you start to treat them fairly badly. You get used to them. A new person in your classroom is really interesting for a few days, and then you start to treat them like you treat everybody else. Okay? So that's what they did with this dragon king. They were really pleased with him at first, but after a while, he got to be a little boring, and a bit of a joke. And so the children in the village started to throw dirt at him and stuff rocks in his mouth and tease him and all of that, until his scales began to fall off his body, and he was very miserable and unhappy. And he went back to the road, he sat down, and of course, who should come walking along? The Bodhisattva. And the Dragon King said to the Bodhisattva, "Listen, Bodhisattva, you told me to be more compassionate. And look what's happened. People mistreat me." And the Bodhisattva thought, "Oh, goodness me, you silly Dragon King, of course you must be compassionate, but you must also be wise. Use both your wings, not just one wing. When someone treats you badly, then you must breathe fire. Use your fiery breath properly." And that's what people who are subject to bullying have to do. Of course we try to understand the person, but the person is also doing bad things, harmful things. And probably not just to you, but to others as well. And in the end, they're going to harm themselves. We call that karma, Thien in Vietnamese. If you do dreadful things to people, it rebounds on yourself eventually. At the very least, you will become used to being nasty, and that will become a habit. And you will not be able to change that habit. And you grow up nasty. So we have a responsibility to ourselves, to other people who are hurt, and to the bully to say, stop. Now you might not be able to do that yourself, because after all you're subject to the bully. But you have a mother and a father and teachers and a school principal, and they can say stop. So when you are being bullied, of course you understand and you use the power of your mind not to get angry, not to do it, but you also must help the bully by setting a limit to what they're doing and saying, you can't do this. This is wrong, it's not good for me, it's not good for others, it's not good for you. And you do that by talking about it with your parents and making sure that your parents go to the school and explain this to the principal. Because we know that there are a number of schools that have programs already set up to help bullies get over this bullying and to help each other avoid bullies. Okay? So if the resource is in your school, then you must use it. If it's not in your school, then you must encourage the principal, your family and others must encourage the principal to introduce programs to prevent bullying in the school.
You would like to add on with your answer, would you mind?
Sorry?
Is the Kimchi would like to ask to add on with what you already explained, would you mind?
I would like to have something regarding the question the brother in the Dharma just asked, because bullying is a part of violence. And I remember that about 3 months ago, probably 2 months ago, when the Dalai Lama came to talk in Adelaide, his main theme is how we live and solve the problem in the violent society nowadays. And he said the best way is education. We just can't pray to make people become peaceful. And talking about education, I think the role of school, the role of parents, everyone is very important. And it also connected to what Thầy just explained to us, that we have 3 things. First thing, Buddha. The second thing, we have Dharma, and last one is spiritual friends. We have to know to get close to those people to become wise, so that the way we can avoid ourselves from the trouble and help other people when they have trouble. And today, we come here, we listen to the Dharma that we don't have in school. At school, you can only improve your intelligence. You can accumulate your knowledge in academic projects, subjects like math, things like that. But such a thing we taught today is wisdom. And we can't learn it from school, only from people who have a spiritual practice and walking the Buddha path. And hopefully that, not only today but in the future, particularly to young people, like in Japan just expressed, we appreciate very much your presence tonight, is that going somewhere to have fun, you choose to come here. That's very, very clever and wise decision to make. We appreciate that very much. And hopefully that in the future we will have a little group. We teach people how to meditate. So that can calm your mind and actually that make your, whatever you do, you still do well in what you choose, but at the same time be happy. So that's a little thing I would like to add on, because I look at the clock already 9, and Thầy must be very tired because he has to travel from here to Victor Harbour tonight as well. So probably unless we have any other very urgent and pressing questions to ask, otherwise, so it's up to Thầy to end the session or, because I just worry that it's long distance.
Okay.
So you still have that question to go.
So I have one question here, and let me say that if there are questions that you are a little shy to ask tonight, or questions that don't come up until later, you are always welcome to email me with your questions, and I will always answer them. And if you want my email address, here at the front has my email address, and you can ask him for it if you want to. You don't have to, of course, but if you want to, I'm always happy to receive emails. I receive a lot of emails from young people doing Year 12 projects, and they want to know about Buddhism. And I always give those emails priority of answering, because young people are, for us old people, very precious and very important, and we love them and want to love. We love you and we want to love you and make life more full and rich.
Can you please tell your email address now?
Okay.
Just verbally, and we can remember that.
Okay. My email address is Thong Phap, and all lowercase, one word, Thong Phap @y7mail.com. I can just write it down and leave it on the table.
Okay, do you remember his name? Thong Phap? Thong Phap?
Thong, that's Thong.
PHAD.
PHAP.
At Y male, Y for young. You remember you young? Young, Y male,
Y7 mail.
Y7.
That's the numeral.
That's number 7, lucky 7. Remember lucky 7, alright? Y7 male. Thong Phap at y7mail.com.
Yes.
Alright? Thank you.
Okay. And I will answer probably the day I receive it. Okay. And the question here is, for the precept of no stealing, is it still considered stealing if we take something that is not ours without asking for a long time and then give it back? Does it depend on how valuable the item is? And does it also depend on our attention or their reaction? So that's really several questions, and I'll start with the first one. Is it really stealing if we take something for a long time and then give it back? Well, some people might like to call that borrowing. But if you're going to borrow something from somebody, you have to ask first. If I want to borrow Chum's camera, I have to go and say, Chum, do you mind if I borrow your camera? And he can say yes or no, and I have to accept his answer, because it's his camera and it's precious to him. But if I look at Chum's camera there and say, oh, look, I think I'll just take it and give it back in a month. In that month, Chum is going to be really upset, because where has my camera gone? What did I do with my camera? How could it have disappeared? Blah, 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 blah. Because I have not asked him, I have caused him a great deal of suffering. And that's what happens when we steal something. we cause another person a great deal of suffering. When I was 20, how old was I? 1977, so 25. When I was 25, I had a motorbike, and in those days, you could park your motorbike outside your house, mostly, and not worry about it. And not lock it up or anything. When I was a boy, you didn't even have to lock your car. Other people remember that you didn't lock your car in Adelaide because nobody would steal your car. But things have changed. And I got out to go in the morning to Teachers College and my motorbike was gone. I got it back about a month later and it was completely stripped. And I stopped trusting people for some time. And I was deeply hurt by that. And it made my life very inconvenient for several days until I figured out how am I going to get to college now without high school. So when we steal something, or when we borrow without asking, we are causing somebody else a lot of suffering. Not only that, we are creating for ourselves a very bad habit. Okay? From a Buddhist point of view, not that it's not okay, it's not helpful to you and it's not helpful to others if you take something without asking for it first, even if it's just a piece of chocolate out the fridge. Okay? When in my tradition, when you become a bhikkhu, on the day that you, or a bhikkhuni, on the day that you take your vows from the Vinaya, you must also take 40 bodhisattva vows. And one of them teaches us that we must not take even a blade of grass without asking first. So taking something for a long time without asking and then giving it back is just another way of saying stealing. Does it depend on how valuable the item is? What do you think? You know, you can steal a car that's expensive, or you can steal a block of chocolate that's not very expensive, or you could steal someone's pen out of their pencil case, their favourite pen that they love writing with. Now, a pen is nowhere near as valuable as a car. Is it okay to steal it? No, it's not. And does it also depend on our intention or their reaction? Well, if you steal something, your intention is to steal it. That's that simple. You know, you don't have a good intention by stealing. Your intention is to steal and deprive someone of their own property and cause them suffering. Their reaction, no, you don't need to worry about their reaction. You have to worry about your intention. In Buddhism we say that, I've got to think for a minute, the worldling is concerned about consequences, but the bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva, is concerned about causes. Now you might think, oh, if I do that, oh, will it have this consequence and that consequence? Oh, I'm really concerned about what will happen if I do this. That's not a really wise way to think about it. The wise thing to think about is the causes. If I do this, will it bring harm to myself and others? Will it become a habit that I can't give up? Will it make my life become unlivable as a human being? And the answer is yes, it will. So don't steal. Okay. There are no more questions?
Actually,
there's one over here.
our time is limited. However, we will give one more question. The Moses, we have to finish the Dharma talk tonight at 9:30. Is there too much? Anyone? But today Friday anyhow, isn't it? So is that all right? 9:30 we finish? Or about 5 minutes to probably 9:25, and then we conclude the talk and we will ask Thai and all of you to come to the back to have some thinking again. Yeah. All right, yeah, thank you.
I work in a profession where you can carry out abortions, and the first precept is no killing, but in some circumstances where abortion, is it ever justifiable to carry out an abortion in circumstances such as rape, or when you can't raise a child when you know you can't raise a child? Is it ever, I guess, like a compassionate thing to carry out an abortion? Or will you be kind of not disobeying the first precept of no killing?
Are you a nurse?
No, I'm fastest, so we can dispense things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they called excorians or something?
No, it's just a pill that they take, yeah.
Okay. Believe it or not, the very first time I met a Buddhist monk in 1978, he was asked the same question. And I've always appreciated his answer as being truthful. He was a Canadian monk in a Tibetan tradition, and he was called Namjal Rinpoche. So I'm going to give you mostly the answer he gave me, because I've never heard a better one. Right? And he said, and I'm saying, I'm a Buddhist monk. I could never agree with killing. Okay. However, if we lived in a world where every child was welcomed, where there was no prejudice against a woman who has a child out of wedlock, or there were men who there was no rape or those kind of things, that would be okay. But we don't live in that kind of world. So the advice that the Rinpoche gave was that we have to work to build a world that means it's not necessary for abortions to happen. And that's one of the things. Of course, that's a great ideal and a long way off. And in some ways, the world is no different now than it was in 1978. So, if there's an alternative, it would be better to take that alternative. From my point of view, in the end, it's always going to have to be the choice of the person having a baby. That woman has to live with the consequences of an unwanted pregnancy, and she's also going to have to live with the consequences of the abortion. And so it has to be her choice. If she chooses an abortion, then we have to love her and support her through that time and never judge her. Because the choice to have an abortion is a very difficult and painful choice for a mother to make. And we don't help by making judgments about that. Our only task, if she has to have an abortion, is to support her and love her. Now, I can hold my principled Buddhist position as a monk, but life is more complex than that. And there are all kinds of motives for people doing things, all kinds of motives for them getting, all kinds of reasons for getting pregnant in the first place, all kinds of reasons for not wanting. My task is not to judge, but it's to love and support and understand. The most Venerable Thich says, blaming never helps. Only love and compassion can help people change. The same, I think, has got to be true in the end about assisted suicide, or what's the word for it? Voluntary euthanasia. For myself, I find that very difficult. It's a very, very fraught problem, and we have to come to terms with it as a community. But in the end, if a person makes that choice, and many do make it, through car accidents, overdosing, all kinds of things, they make that choice. It's not for us to judge them. It's our role is to love them and care for them and to create a world in which such things no longer are necessary.
Right, I think that we need to stop here. Thank you very much for this question. It's very, very hard question, very tough question, very sensitive. Thank you very much, Thầy. I think we should conclude here. Is there any concern about it? No more questions? If you have any questions that Thầy already mentioned, so I will repeat the email của Thầy as thongphap@y7mail.com. thongphap@y7mail.com. So please, just you are welcome to send all your questions concerning your personal issue or anything relating to Buddhism, how to help you to live confidently, in control, and to be successful, less suffering, live in harmony with your families, with your friends. As I summarized the 3 important things Thầy already teach us. To be confident, calm, confident, control. We can obtain through meditation to be mindful, be mindful, at all times. It's helped you a lot. Secondly, it's about the road, the main road is a Dharma. It's been Thich Thong Phap. You need to know in depth about Buddhism by coming, listen to Dharma talk from all the monk and nun, the one is being well trained in Buddhism, and also you can do search to the website like wonderful.com from Melbourne or any other means from your parents, from their role model, from surrounding you every day, and all your network. Network is the third one, is very important. Is about your friends. Okay? Choose carefully good friends to be with because they are helping you, to be happy and to be successful in your life. Thank you very much for attending the Dharma talk at Minh Meditation Center tonight, and I wish you all the nice weekend and successful with your study for the rest of the year, and hopefully that you will get in touch and in contact with Thầy. The email address already been given to you. And last but not least, you are all welcome and being invited to come in the back rooms is where we have some food for you, light super for you to enjoy. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Before we absolutely finish, I wondered if we could put our hands together to dedicate the merit that we've made tonight. And if we could stand up.
Friends and family, be kind to cats and butterflies and trees. Don't hurt the fish swimming in the sea. Here is what the Buddha says to me. To love is to care for all the livings around us. To love is to be kind to all beings around us. To love is to care for all the livings around us. To love is to be kind to all beings around us. Be kind to all your friends and family. Be kind to cats and butterflies and trees. Don't hurt the fishes swimming in the sea. Here is what the Buddha says to me. To love